Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my video. So in this video, I want to showcase the features of my personal website, which I've got a side project for, which I call DataOS, Dataless. And it's basically a desktop environment in the browser, which is essentially as if you're running a Windows basically within the browser. The idea behind it was that someone could go to my website, dustinbrett.com, and kind of get the experience like they've remote desktoped into my personal computer. And they almost feel like, should I be seeing this? Is this right? And you can access the files, the pictures, all the things as if you're like kind of on my computer, and a lot more. And it's just become kind of like a passion project over the last 3 years as I've been working on it. So I wanted to do this third video where I once again showcase all the changes I've made and just in general all the things it can do, or try to say them all, but we'll see how far I get. And I've prepared some test files and kind of a test document here that I'll just drag onto the desktop, which kind of showcases the first feature. We'll just jump right into it, by the way. This is a browser right here. This is the Chrome browser, and I've got my website here, dustinbrett.com. You can just press refresh, and it'll load right like that with the default wallpaper, which is called Waves, and it's kind of like got a bit of a wavy effect. I'm actually running it on my computer over here as well, and it's doing another wallpaper called the Picture Slideshow. If you just right-click on the desktop, it's got context menus. If you right-click on the desktop here, you can change the background. So Picture Slideshow is just my personal pictures. Every 12 seconds, it kind of goes through my photos, and they're in a folder on the desktop here. If you go to the public folder and the pictures folder, you can actually see a slideshow.json where it actually lists every file that's in the slideshow, basically. And you could customize this yourself. This is an open source project. That's an important part to mention about this. It's called DataOS. It's on GitHub, and you can create a branch of it yourself. And this is actually a client-side only application, which is kind of something that I'm pretty happy about. And I've worked really hard for it to be that way, where every single thing basically is just HTML, JavaScript, WebAssembly, all the features that are in modern browsers, basically. This works with mobile, works with desktop, works with Safari, Firefox, Chrome, pretty much any browser within the last couple of years I've tried to make it work with. But I'm always finding little glitches here and there, and it's a little tricky. Safari is pretty tough nowadays. That's like the tough one to do. But yeah, it works with all those. So you can kind of run this yourself. And this picture folder here, like that's the paths to all the pictures, but they're all relative to right here, so you can find them here as well. Like the portrait one of me, that was the one that was playing in the background a second ago. And like I said, I've got it switching every 12 seconds these right now. I'm tweaking the timing. At one point it was per 1 minute. Just to continue showcasing the wallpapers here while we're at it. The first one is called APOD, which is basically grabbing from the API of Astronomy Photo of the Day. So if you were to pick APOD, and if you were to use this for your own, or if every time you come to my site and you picked APOD, all these settings are remembered, by the way. So if I refresh the page and come back again, it remembers you picked APOD. And every day it'll be a different photo from the Astronomy Photo of the Day site. Coastal Landscape, this is kind of a fun one that I like. It's like not really Windowsy. It's almost like Van Gogh slash the Bliss wallpaper from Windows XP. That's kind of why I decided to add this one. It wasn't easy to add. And all throughout this, many of the features, I've kind of glued it all together. I've presented it in a nice way within my site. But it's all based on open source projects as well, other people's open source projects. So kind of working on the shoulders of giants kind of thing. This is another cool one, Hexelis. It's very like visual, but it actually has some kind of like neural net-esque type concepts going on. It was made by a guy at Google, and that's a pretty cool one I like to use sometimes. This Matrix one is a really good Matrix recreation that I'm pretty happy I was able to get on, because I always wanted to have the Matrix one. I had this Matrix screensaver as a kid when I had a computer. So whenever, screensavers back in the day. It was close to this, but this person has gone really extreme to making it pretty close, and it's customizable too. So I've tweaked this version a little bit to look the green that I want, the speed that I want, the amount of glyphs showing. There's also a 3D version, which is kind of like flying through the landscape. That's a pretty fun one as well. The slideshow I've gone through, and then the waves one is the default. And the other one here that's kind of like, I've got beta in brackets, and I would say it's almost like alpha beta. Like it's very temperamental, and you need a pretty powerful computer. But what it does, it's actually running the Stable Diffusion AI image creation model. And it's again, if you go to that same folder, pictures, there's another JSON file called prompts, and here is the prompts for how to make different wallpapers, like temple in ruins, forests, stairs, columns. Basically the way that Stable Diffusion 1.5 used to take prompts for how to make images, I've kind of built that into a wallpaper. I won't demo it here because it kind of kills my computer with it like cranks it up to 100% because it uses a technology called web GPU and basically uses the graphics card to its full, not really full potential in an unoptimized way to make the images. But I could show an example here. If I click it and I go Stable Diffusion, it's going to start downloading the library right away and it'll show the status there. So there's that cool thing. And if I click the Start menu here and I click the power button at the bottom, we can reset because I'm not going to let that finish. As soon as it finishes downloading all the libraries and models that it needs from the Hugging Face website, which is like an open source place where you can host models, then it gets slow because it starts to use the GPU pretty fast. But I did create one as an example here. I'll drag it on from my Windows machine, which we'll discuss drag and drop a bit more in a bit. But I'll just show the example here just to finish off the wallpapers. If you click on this one here, and as you can see when you hover over the files, you have tooltips. It also creates dynamic thumbnails. It's also got a drag and drop grid, so you can put it anywhere in the grid. But if we open it here, yeah, this is a wallpaper it creates. So every 10 minutes, Stable Diffusion could make a new wallpaper based on those prompts, and you could customize that as well. And this is all running local, so it actually downloads the model data, but running and creating these images is happening local, and every time you get a unique image, basically. So I thought that was a pretty cool concept, which is why I've added it there, but it's very temperamental, let's say, so take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, so that's the wallpapers. And now let's get to the drag and drop part where I drag the list over that I've kind of created so I can remember the other stuff I want to discuss. So as you see here, I dragged another thing over. This is the folder here. Oops. Another Windows feature that I forgot. When you kind of wiggle the folders in Windows 10, everything minimizes. So I won't be doing any folder wiggling from my Windows 10 folders. But this test files folder here is on my host Windows machine. And this is my website behind it, just to not get confused, because it's kind of, I hope, confusing. Like, my goal is for it to look so similar. If we open up the File Explorer here, this is the File Explorer that I've created, and this is the Windows 10 one. So I've tried to kind of make them very similar. You can see they have the same hover effects, and if you see them side by side, it could be a little hard to tell, like, this one's on the website, and this one's actually coming from the machine. There's pieces I haven't copied, and it's kind of intentional, and that's throughout the site, it's like that. Is I've done the way that I want my Windows 10 to be and the way that I would have made Windows 10 had I made it. So things like this bar here, I actually don't have menu bars at all right now. I haven't needed them too much, but I probably will at one point. And when I do, I'm not sure if they'll look like this. This is like the version I don't like anyways. But I've copied the search, the buttons, the address bar, the folders, that kind of thing. So most of it I've kept. The status bar stuff here, although there's a few buttons I don't have, and I don't have some of the different views for icons is something I haven't done. But for the most part, this is my idealized version of it, and this is how it is locally for me. And we're going to go through all these test files and how I support them. So let's start off with the one that I dragged on, which is the Markdown document, and I have a Markdown viewer, so we'll start with opening that. And I actually have multiple ways to open it. If you right-click on a file, you get context menus. You get context menus throughout the whole site. The first one is open. That's like the default action, same as when I double clicked. There's also open with. And recently this year, I've added choose another app, which allows you to open it with any other app that I support. So by default, it has like the ones that it can open it with. So Monaco Editor, Vim. It thinks it can open it with the emulator because these MD documents, .md extensions are actually also Mega Drive, and I support Genesis Mega Drive emulator ROMs. So it's not 100% sure here if it's an emulated Mega Drive file or if it's a Markdown document. So they're both in the list. But also if you do choose another app, as you see here, you get that familiar open with menu that you had in Windows 10, and you can pick from any of the apps that I support. Any of the apps that reasonably could open a file. There's apps that I have that aren't in this list, and they basically, it just wouldn't make sense to open anything except for one type of file with those. But for all these other ones, it can try, and it can sometimes do pretty cool. And we can demo that a bit shortly. But instead of opening the Markdown viewer, I'm going to actually open it in Monaco Editor because I actually prefer to be able to edit it as we go over the list. So another app I'm demoing here is the Monaco Editor. And Monaco Editor is basically the engine piece of VS Code. So this looks very similar to VS Code because in some ways it is like VS Code, but it's only a part of it. It's not like the file menu and all those other pieces. So it's kind of a simplified version of VS Code, which I thought was really cool. So this to me is like Notepad++ kind of thing, because there's already a Notepad++, but we'll talk about, I can run Notepad++ on my website too, which we'll get into. But this to me is like the best way to have it. And I've added some features as well. Like I added a save button here. I've added prettier as well. So for some type of formatting documents, it can do prettier where it can format it, like markdown documents, JSON, things like that. So like let's say I open up the session file here, and you see here it's always minified. But if I prettier it, I click here, it'll actually prettify the JSON, which is another cool feature that I've kind of added to my version of VS Code. And it'll tell you if it detects what kind of file it is here, JSON type. Here it knows that it's a markdown document. So again, we've gone over its client side. So you can delete that, and you can press Control S to save, or you can also press save from here, and that also persists. So if I refresh the page, I come back. Now you who have visited my site have a personal version of the document, basically, which you dragged on anyway. So it already was your document. But you can do that for any of the documents. You can edit them, and once you edit them, they become locally within your browser saved, your version of them. So again, it's all client side within the browser, which was kind of what I was just demoing there. File persistence, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. So you can have anything you drag and drop on, you get persistence. And let's continue this drag and drop conversation. And I want to show some of the power that I've added. Even recently, I've added some more. But so let's move. I'm going to squish the window a tiny bit here so that we can see a bit more of the folder structure. And also this background wallpaper is my desktop. And what I want to show here is that not only can you drag from a folder, so like let's see the folder here, we'll take this font file, and I can drag it, and then when I drop it on, you see it'll actually go into my website. Another feature that I've added recently, and this only works for files that are already on my site, not a file that you create on the site, but for files that are already on my site, what you can do, like let's say one of my blog posts here, is if I open it here, I can actually drag it from my website, off of my website, onto the desktop, like that. And it triggers the download automatically and puts it right there. So that's another thing where I've actually managed to get drag and drop even in another direction. Because I already have drag and drop here too. Like I can drag, where was the file? It was this one here. I can drag it here and internally move it onto my virtual website desktop. But not only that, now I can also drag it out into the real world. And I think this works with most browsers because it's a known function. I actually kind of just copied the way the Gmail does it. Gmail, you can do this too. You can take an attachment and just drag it off. So I was able to copy that. It's not too hard, actually. So that's another cool feature where it's like even more draggable than before, basically. And we'll just shrink this back to its original size, which was 1900 for demo purposes. So yeah, so that's some of the power that we have with drag and drop now. And like I said, you can drag and drop with from here to here. Another cool thing you can do is I've also added a ton of keyboard shortcuts that we'll go throughout. But if I were to pick another one here, I click this and I can go Control C on my keyboard. And then if I click on the desktop and go Control V, it'll actually paste it. It pastes it right here. So I've also got keyboard shortcuts that way. And I think that even works externally too. So let's say within this is a Windows folder here, and I pick, let's say, this TIFF file, and I go Control C, and then on my web desktop I do Control V. No, that didn't work. Oh wait, I think I know why that doesn't work. I think that's actually like a known bug. Let's try this again. Now I refresh the page. Now when I do Control V, there we go. There's the TIFF. Yeah. So if in the web desktop you've also copied something to the clipboard, that takes precedence over what you copy externally. So that's why I just tried to make another duplicate of the document that I copied in my original example. But it does work. So you can Control C from here, like let's say solitaire, Control C, and I can do Control V. There we go. And as you see here, it's making dynamic thumbnails all throughout. So for the TIFF file, it was able to read TIFF files, which is not a default browser functionality. I can open TIFF files. This is another demo example I wanted to give. But also for executables. This was a tough one to figure out. But for executable files, it'll actually extract the icon as well and use it. So you can see here this sol.exe, it actually got the icon. And to go like 12 levels deeper, not only can my website read an icon for sol.exe, which is solitaire for like the Windows 95 version of solitaire that I just found on the internet randomly, just for this demo, but it can also run it. So if you double click this sol.exe, it's going to run it. And this is demoing another one of the apps, which is called Boxed Wine, which essentially can run a Windows emulator in the browser. So as you see here, it can fully run the game Solitaire. And this is the real version of Solitaire. Just randomly, just any exe it can run, basically. I mean, not any exe. And you can see here it's running on Wine 1.7. That's cool that it even knows that. But that's one pretty cool example that it can actually run those executables. And it can do it for other ones too. Like here's WinMine. and you can just run WinMine, and that's of course Minesweeper. So pretty much any Windows 95 game you can run that way, because it can run 16-bit and 32-bit games. So it can do 64-bit executables. That's tricky. It can extract the icons from them often, but it can't run them in boxed wine. So that's one limitation. Speaking about Windows, old Windows things, here's another interesting one, and demo another app while we're at it, is the Win 3.1 image. And this .image file can be a .img file, sorry. And an IMG file is actually like a hard disk image or a floppy disk image or some kind of disk image, basically. And I actually have a thing to run x86 emulation. So that can run any kind of thing, any kind of ISO, Linux, or in this case, Windows 3.1. I think this was on like WinBuild's site or something, basically just a live image of Windows 3.1. Or I might have got this directly from the people that make the emulator. Like this emulator is called Virtual x86. But there you go, as you see now. So on my website, I'm running Windows 3.1, which is pretty crazy. And it's fully functional as well, and it probably has the same apps somewhere. Yeah, here's soul.exe. I can't take it out of there and put it in the app. That would be cool. But there's no, they don't even have right-click menus, or that's weird. I don't know if right-click menus were even a feature back then. Perhaps not. That's funny. Yeah, it doesn't do right-click for this, but that's another pretty crazy demo, and you have to press escape to get out of that because it does mouse lock into the emulator for that. What are some other examples here? I have so many. Let's open up this document again to go through it here. And the right-click menu has lots of things we can discuss along the way. But let's try to have some kind of structure here, because I did make a list. So let's at least make sure we do the greatest hits, right? So that was the file persistence. You can see there's file persistence going on all over the place here. We can talk about the animations. So I'm using Framer, it's called, to do the animations, or just kind of orchestrate them. It's still just CSS animations in the end, but they work pretty stable. I mean, I could try to break it here. Maybe I can, but let's say something like, if you click a taskbar item, it does minimize, maximize. So I can click this pretty hard, and it's actually doing it without crashing, so that's nice. If you hover over taskbar items, you see here, it'll actually do something called what I call peek, where it'll actually take a picture of that element, and you can see it live. So let's say if I select all these items here, so they're all blue, and then I hover over here, you see now the image shows them as blue, because that's real. And you can close them from here as well. So that's some of the animations you can do. You can also, let's say we have several windows open. More windows, let's open this one too. Now if we right click on the taskbar, you can do show the desktop, and it'll minimize them all. And then you could say show open windows to reveal them. And I've also got that through keyboard shortcuts. So I think it's Control-Shift-D. Yeah, Control-Shift-D can make them all minimize and maximize. And I've got various keyboard shortcuts that we can go through. Control-Shift-R will open up the run dialog. I've kind of copied the run dialog to the best of my ability, and it functions for the most part as well. You can also right-click the start button to open up the run dialog. I barely even discussed the start menu, but if you're familiar with the Windows, you'll see there's a start menu here as well. You can click to open up the start menu with a lot of the programs that we're kind of going over right now, and we'll discuss more. If we miss any, we can just launch them from here or from that run dialog. We got a sidebar here as well that's kind of emulating the same functionality as well, and you can kind of do shortcuts to get to some of my documents or to my pictures. I also have a couple of videos on here. Not too many things, but I've kind of got some just shortcuts to the greatest hits for what a personal website would want to have as well. Let's see what else is on the list here then. So, oh yeah, and also resizing windows. I mean, I've kind of been doing that along the way, but yes, we have dynamic resizing. I've also copied the way the cursors are. You can see it resizes that way. I also notice here there's a snapshot folder that just got created, that whenever you run any of the emulators on my site, like the x86 one or any game emulator or DOS emulator as well, and when you close it, it will create a snapshot so you can go back to that same moment. So you can see here it created the Windows 3.1 snapshot. So if I were to open up Windows 3.1 again, it automatically restores that, and we'll just be right back into Windows 3.1, as you see. And it's still completely. Am I just jinxing myself by saying it's functional? Okay, no, it is. Why can't I move this window? Maybe that's another Windows 3.1 feature or lack of feature, but it still works. So it has that snapshot constantly where I can just close it. I can come back another day and just jump right back into Windows 3.1 or whatever the emulator happens to be. And if you don't want to jump back in, you see it updates the screenshot too. You could also just right-click and press delete to not have it remember the snapshot, obviously, or cut it to save it for another day, and then you could bring it back when you want to restore it. And also you see here that it does folder preview of whatever's in the folder. So you see that the little green uh, thing within that folder icon is actually coming from this icon that it was in here. And that's another dynamic feature that auto creates the icons and keeps the cache updated. As well, I have animated icons here. You can see these ones are animated. I don't think Windows 10 has animated icons, but that would be cool if they did. I'm not sure if they do or not, though. I don't remember seeing that. Let's go back to the list here. So yeah, we just went over resize, minimize, maximize. Oh, on the keyboard shortcut note too, there's also minimize, maximize. Oh, also you can double click the title bar to maximize. You could, if you double click the icon, it closes it. That's how it works in Windows 10 as well. And if you do Control Shift up, it maximize, like up and down. Once you focus in a window, we'll do like the minimize, maximize, restore, kind of go through the process. So up is max, and then down to restore again, down to minimize, up to go back up, and so on. So that's another cool little keyboard shortcut I've tried to add. I've tried to have as much accessibility as possible within the app, but I'm still kind of learning in accessibility, I would say. So it's not 100%. Let's just say that. But I'm working on it basically. So this note here, go over all commands in the terminal. I'll mention it quickly, and then we'll start going over some, but I'll probably go into these as well. So there's lots of ways to launch the terminal. In any folder, if you were to right click somewhere and you could open terminal here, and it'll open in that folder. Same with on the desktop, you can open a terminal here. Another shortcut is Shift F10 will also open a terminal. So if you just have a fresh desktop with almost nothing open, you could just do Shift F10 to get a terminal right away. Another way you could open it is by right-clicking here and going to Run, and then just typing in terminal. Wait, why can't I type in? Let me refresh here. There's a known bug where boxed wine will sometimes steal my keyboard. So let me open up Run again. Terminal, there we go. Terminal, and it opens up a terminal. I've also got some shortcuts to it, so like CMD, which in Windows is like command prompt. I also have that just be the terminal as well, kind of like an alias. You can also get to it from the start menu itself at the T's for terminal alphabetically. So yeah, this is the terminal, and I've tried to emulate, again, most of what the command prompt can do. I've fallen short in some ways, but I've tried to. So if you type help, you're going to see the list of commands. There's tons of them. I would say all the basic ones that you're used to. I've also got some aliases for Linux commands, so like dir for a directory, but you can also do ls for which is essentially the same thing as the Linux one, but it doesn't display the Linux way. I still display it the Windows way. I just know about the alias there. So if we do help here, we can do top to bottom. But let's just discuss them and see where it gets us. So yeah, like you have the ones you recognize, the changing directories, clearing the thing, changing the color of the terminal. I've never done that, but I decided to copy it because it's something that exists. File functions like copy, delete. I've got date, just so you know the current date if for some reason you want. Same with time, to know the current time. I've also got uptime where I track how long you're in that session. So we've only been in this 1 minute and 24 seconds since I refreshed the page, I guess. That's very possible. Exit just closes it. Echo, yeah, just echoes your stuff. A lot of these are the commands you're used to. Some of the ones here that get more into the internal functionality that I'll discuss as well are things like FFmpeg and ImageMagick or XLSX. These are like file conversion tools. So you can convert video or images or pictures or audio or spreadsheets from one format to another. That's something I have throughout my app, just usually through right-click menus, but it's also something you can access in the console. I have a command called file to tell you what types of files there are. So like, let's see if we go to the desktop here in the end, and then we go file WinMine. I also have autocomplete. It knows it's an application, MS download application, and it can do this for all of them. So let's say that TIFF file is called AT3, and I can press tab to get autocomplete. And yeah, it knows that's an image TIFF file. So that's a way to kind of know what the file types are. Another little functionality I have there. The history will tell you the history of kind of your command prompt. ipconfig, I actually have it talk to Cloudflare to get your IP. So that's my IP. I don't know if I should have shown everyone my IP, but it's all the same. I mean, I got the firewall. Plus it changes all the time, actually, unfortunately. So I don't do any web hosting through that IP. What else we got? Git. That's a cool one. Let's go over Git. So I open up the file here because I had an example link. So here's a Git repo of awesome desktop it's just a markdown file basically that lists different desktops. They list mine on there. I like their website, but you can clone Git repos. So if I do git clone and I paste the URL, it'll ask for permission to use the clipboard. Yes, and then there we go. And I can do a cloning, and it actually will do cloning of Git completely client side, talking to Git like GitHub, and there we go. And it cloned it. It decided to put it here for some reason instead of there, but that's okay. And yeah, there we go. So it actually cloned the repo, and you can see the repo with the same files and everything that are actually in there. Looks like these images are relative, so they didn't open properly. But it cloned the repo, which is a pretty cool feature. And it can do a lot of other Git commands. It can basically do all the Git commands, actually. And that's using a tool called isomorphic Git. What else do we got here? For mounting local file systems, this one's pretty cool. So if you see here, remember I have my test files that are on my actual operating system over here. But what I can do is I can right-click on my desktop and go map directory. And this is the same as mount. Actually, I could just do it here. So let's run the command. We'll say mount and just press enter. And then I have to pick those test files, which are here. And I say select folder. And then the browser asks me, do you want permission to let this person look at that folder? You say yes. And there we go. It mounted it, and it actually goes right to it here. And there it created the folder on my desktop. And if you open up that folder, you'll see it actually has access to all of those files, the same ones that I have in Windows here. So that's the Windows one, and this is the web one, and they're actually able to talk to each other through the browser file system sharing API, it's called. And I actually have better support for some of these icons, I think. Like WebAssembly here, Windows doesn't know what to do with that. I have support for WebAssembly. QOI files, I can create a thumbnail for the QOI image types. Windows doesn't have support for that. Same with JXL. I have built-in support for JXL, which is another image format. Same for animated thumbnails. I have animated thumbnails. It doesn't know how to animate this video here. So that's another cool one there, the mounting of the files. What other commands here? NeoFetch. This was a fun one. This is like a thing for showing the stats of your system, basically. So if I type NeoFetch, I've recreated essentially what NeoFetch looks like. And there's the NeoFetch for my web desktop, where it just is. It's like a tool that just tells you about your operating system. So it'll tell me like the packages. I've got 31 apps. Now we have 5 minutes of uptime. It tells you your browser, all this kind of cool stuff. I think it knows the video card, although maybe because I'm in incognito, it wasn't able to figure that out. I think so. But if you're not in incognito mode like I am, it can also tell you about your video card, which is kind of neat. What are the other commands here? I also have the ability to run Python. You can make a Py file, or you can just do Python 1+1, and it's actually going to download the Python libraries and run Python in the browser too. And you could do a lot more complicated than that, but I don't have any good examples for the Python files. You can do who am I, which is basically fake, but it's like within my fake OS, you are the public user, so it's kind of the same command again. This weather here is powered by some weather API, but this is actually works. Yeah, I'm in Canada. I'm in Vancouver area. I'm not in Coquitlam, but that's fine. What other things can it do? Uptime, I've mentioned. Title. One other fun one is sheep, and I'll show there's a few ways to launch sheep. But first I can do sheep here, and it's basically going to launch a web sheep. This is the little web sheep guy. These guys are really fun. They used to be in the Windows 95 days. You can drag him around. He'll interact with the windows here and land on the windows and walk on them. So that's kind of fun, and my kids like to play with this one, and my kids used to ask, they always wanted more sheep. So now the sheep command, you can do sheep, and then you could put the number. So let's say if we want 200 sheep, we could say sheep 200, and then you press that, and you're going to get 200 sheep. And there they all come. And actually, some of them aren't the sheep. Some of them will be like these cats, or there's a few other characters, the penguins, and then they'll start just doing their thing. But that's another fun one on my site that you can do. And there's no way to get rid of them, so I'm just going to refresh the page here to get rid of them. A few other ways to launch them. If you see my start button here is a Pi symbol. And I don't know if you've ever seen The Net, the Sandra Bullock movie The Net. You'll know that if you see a Pi symbol on a website, you should hold Control and Shift and press the Pi symbol. And if you do that on my website, it opens the start menu, but it also spawns a sheep. So that's one way to get some sheep. Another way is to click the clock here, and I'm going to hide my video for a second so I can show. Let's hide this. If you click the clock, you see it shows a little calendar here. So that's just I wanted to show a little preview of the calendar. I'll bring myself back here. Hey, I'm back. But if you were to click that same button 7 times, you will get a sheep. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. And the sheep instantly comes from the corner. He's ready to jump in and be part of the party. So that's another fun one, is you can kind of launch these sheep. That's, like I said, my kids love that one. Opening up the document again here. Oh, I never saved it last time we edited some of this. I'd say I've gone through pretty much all the terminal stuff. I might have missed a few, but you can check those out. I just discussed the Easter egg sheep. Another cool one you can do here. We'll see how it goes, because I'm doing a live stream right now to capture the video. And what I can do, if you right click on the desktop, I now have capture screen, where you can actually make a video of what you're doing on my site. So here you can say, yeah, I want to capture it. And now you essentially could show someone, oh, wow, that's a weird bug. It kind of moved the icons a little bit. I didn't expect that bug, but that's fine. Anyway, we're capturing this bug in the stream in this. So now you can press the stop sharing button, or what you can do is you right click the desktop, and you can also do stop screen capture. And it stops it, and what you see is it actually will create the capture right away on the desktop here. And it'll create the thumbnail for it, and you can play it just like that. So we can open it here, and there's the capture that it made. And you could download this and share it to show other people how you used my site if you wanted to, which is kind of a cool feature. And as far as how you would download it, then you can right click the file and press download, and it'll download it to wherever you want to download it to, let's say the desktop. I also showed that example where you can just click the file and drag it off, although it won't work for screen captures. That's one limitation, is because when you start the drag, it has to know where that whole file is. But when you make the file, such as with a screen capture, the whole file is only on like the index of your browser. So I kind of have to make it into a data URL and have to read the whole file. And for big files, that can kind of be weird when you're trying to drag. So that's a technical reason to explain. Like, I just haven't done it, basically. One day. It's on my list. There's like all those post-its there is kind of my list of to-dos. The ones over here is what I've done this year. It's a smaller list this year than last year if you look at my last video, but I've probably done more. I've just like spent less time making post-its, I guess, I would say. Back to the list here. So yeah, that's the screen capture. That's kind of a cool one. File properties. This is something I added recently that's kind of fun. So let's say for this markdown document right here, if we right click it, now you have the ability to go to properties, and I've actually emulated the property dialog. And I think it did a pretty good job. It looks pretty close to me. So this is again in my website, and this is all the real information as far as when it was created, when it was modified, when it was last accessed, the size. I've tried to figure out exactly the way that Windows displays these things. You can also rename it from here. So actually, let's not rename this one because I'm using this one. We'll rename this one. So we go to properties on this, and it makes a little thumbnail as well, you can see. So we can rename it to 2, let's say, and we just say OK. And there we go. It'll rename to 2, which is kind of neat. So that, yeah, I'm really happy with the file properties, but there's a lot of work to do on it still, so it's kind of a work in progress. I've explained the drag and drops, the copy and paste. Here's another fun one, is view page source. So if you go to a normal website and you right click, you can do things like inspect and view page source. And I've copied like some of that. Like last year I had inspect. So if you right click and you press inspect, I essentially open up another tool called Eruda is their name, I think. But I just call it DevTools because it's like a copy of DevTools, but one that you can run on a website. And you basically have access to essentially a DevTools where you can see all the elements on the page. So you can actually see the internals of the OS while you're in it, which is kind of trippy. This is like an Inception thing. So let's say this list here, these are the icons. So you can see here one of the buttons. So that's the data list button right there. And here's actually the code for it, where you can actually look at the code, look at the properties. You see the label for it and all of its CSS, its width, and all that information. And you can just kind of see like, oh wow, this is actually a website. This is like the internal workings. This would be so cool if you could do this in Windows 10, where you could just like look at how the icons are rendered and the internals of it, basically. That would be really cool. But you can do it with my OS. You can look at network requests, just various things, the source code a little bit. This isn't the best view of it though. That's why I added another feature where if you right click, you can also do view page source. And what it'll do is it'll download the page and then open it in Monaco. So you see here, that's the index file basically. Now there's a bug right now where prettier doesn't work for HTML. So if I click this, it's not gonna do anything. It didn't do anything, unfortunately. So this is very minified HTML, so it's like hard to see, but this is the index page. This gets generated from Next.js, so take it with a grain of salt. Like I didn't write this code necessarily. I wrote the code that made this code, I would say. But this is the HTML of my page when you first visit it. So those are two cool little things I've added to the right click menu. Just kind of jumping around here, I guess we can go with what's on the list here and go more to the start menu again. Some of the features I've added to the start menu, if you see here, as I move my mouse, there's kind of like a spotlight effect, I call it. I've tried to emulate that as it is in Windows 10. Also hiding of the scroll bar until you hover over it. Although I couldn't get it to fade in. Fading in a scroll bar is actually kind of tricky in the browser without a few other things that I also needed. A few other requirements for that, which are tricky. Blur effects as well. You can see like that things behind it are blurred. All throughout, there's these little blur effects that I've added that are part of CSS as well. I think I've kind of gone through most of the start menu. I've also got subfolders here. If we miss any apps that we haven't discussed, we'll go through the subfolders here to discuss them. But that's the basics of the spotlight effect and the reset button. One cool thing here about these title changes with favicons is, as you see here, like I'm focused on this window, it actually changes the icon and the title in your browser as well. So as you switch between the different windows, the icon will change, and it'll change in your start menu, not your start menu, your taskbar as well. So it's kind of just a cool little reflection of what's happening on my website, kind of thing. Context menus everywhere. Yeah, I've got tons of context menus. I think we've gone over a ton of stuff. I added the share feature recently, which kind of is a native browser thing that lets you share with people. I don't know why it mentions my friend Joseph from 20 years ago as the only contact. It's like I never use that share feature in Windows. On the phone though, it's more handy, so it's kind of cool, and it's a good way to save URLs and stuff because it does create a URL of the files, which is handy. Another feature, as I said, is the download button. We went over that. Add to archive is a cool one. So let's say a lot of these files we've created here, we could kind of hover over a bunch of them and multi-select them. And then I can right-click and I say add to archive, and it'll actually create a folder, a zip file, sorry, with these 4 files in it. And then you could download them as one zip file. And that's actually what happens anyways automatically. If you select multiple files on my site and pick download, it will create a zip file and ask to save that zip file wherever you want to save it. So that's just kind of the way it works already. As far as other features with the context menu, there's some very specific context menu stuff within the context of whatever you click. So let's say this, here's an example I have here. So test file, I'll drag in a background image. If you right click the image, not only can you set it as the background, you can also press edit and it'll open it in JS Paint, which is kind of like old school MS Paint, and you could edit it. You can also convert it. So what is the format here? It's a JPEG. I could press convert and actually make it a PNG. And it'll do that using ImageMagick, and there we go. There's the PNG file. And if you check the properties of it and the properties of the other one, you'll see that they're different. Yeah, the JPEG file, the original was only 180 kilobytes, but because my ImageMagick converting, I don't really like tweak any of the settings. It's not efficient. The PNG ended up being over a megabyte, which is quite inefficient. If we right-click the JPEG, we can set it as the wallpaper, and it's a pretty cool wallpaper. I can't remember where I found this, but I think I found it from another web desktop, and I was just using it for testing, and I thought, wow, that's a cool wallpaper. Actually, speaking of cool wallpapers, there's one other feature. I didn't copy the cool example, but I have another example with a video. So let's drag over this video. This is a popular test video, the bunny one. You see we open it here. I have video player to play any kind of video. Not any kind of video. One day I'll have the ability to play pretty much everything, but currently it mostly just supports video codecs that are supported in the browser. So as you see there, that video can play, but with, again, going back to context menus, you can actually set the video as the background too. So I can have the background of my web desktop be this video, which is kind of neat, and it'll just, with no audio, loop it, basically. This can be cool. There's some like animated backgrounds where you can do like a video. I had a cyberpunk one that I've done a video about, and it makes a cool looking background basically. And you can set and you can see it transitions as well. This was the one that Stable Diffusion made. It's not super nice, but I think that feature will be cool in 10 years when Stable Diffusion 8 runs on the browser or something, however like the future of web goes. That's why I hope to keep evolving this app, this project forever basically, because I'm trying to push the boundaries of what browsers can do. So whenever I see something new they can do, I'm like, oh man, it'd be cool. Let's get that into Dataless somehow. That's kind of my thinking for it. So I talked about the share API, I talked about the save states and how it makes those pictures. We talked about OpenWith. Here's another cool thing I've added, IPFS support. So IPFS is like another protocol where you can kind of talk over a different protocol, different technology. So I have a browser. It basically uses an iframe, this browser. It's kind of fake in a lot of ways, but it does work with CORS enabled sites, cross origin request scripting or whatever it's called. I forget the name of it. So sites like Wikipedia, sites like the Internet Archive, or my own site again. You can do like an inception where you open my site in my site in my site. Those work. But something, if I were to go like reddit.com, it's going to do that, and it's not going to work in my iframe world. But what does work is I've also added IPFS gateway proxy support using Cloudflare. So you can directly put an IPFS protocol URL in there, and if you run that, it will actually proxy through, and now you have access to like the IPFS version of Wikipedia. So if there was an IPFS version of Reddit, that also would be accessible in my fake/real browser kind of thing. So that's kind of another cool thing is built-in IPFS support there. And not only do I have it in the browser, but I actually have it built into the whole OS. So if we were open up the run dialog here, I did Control-Shift-R, or you could just right-click here and press run, or we can do it in the terminal, but we'll do it here. So we paste in a different IPFS URL here, IPFS / gibberish, and you press OK. It'll actually download that through the gateway proxy, and then it'll get it as an image and then put it on the desktop automatically. So that's the thing where it can download like files specifically. And this is just some example file that IPFS themselves host. You are a ghost driving a meat-covered skeleton made from stardust, riding a rock floating through space. Fear nothing. Well, that's a nice little message, perhaps. So that's kind of cool. Another thing I've added recently, and if you see here from my desktop, there's an icon here called Dustin Brett. This is something I added recently because I've added direct messaging support, finally, to my site. How am I doing it? I've got a thing here. If you right-click the Start menu, open Messenger, you can see here. This is essentially the experience you would get if you just open Messenger. And this is using something called the Nostr protocol, Nostr. I did a video about it just very recently. And with this, you can directly message me on any Nostr client. And so I basically just built my own Nostr client that you can talk to me on. So if you're not in Messenger and you were to just click me from here, it opens Messenger and jumps right to me. So if you were just visiting my site, you can just type in here and right away you're going to get me. Usually I have this open, my website here, and I'll have the Nostr client open with me logged in, because you can log into this client. This is a client anyone could use. As you can see here, when it first loaded, it just creates a profile for me. So this is just a generic profile it made. And then you can right-click, you can click here, and you can change the username, the picture, the banner, and you can take this as your profile if you want. You can copy the secure and the public and private keys, and then take them and use them elsewhere. I've also got browser extension support. So in my case, if I just open Messenger on that computer over there, I have added in my browser an extension that will pass the private key secretly so that my website never gets to know your key. So that's another thing, and that's how a lot of these Nostr clients work, is if you have this extension, you can just use any Nostr client to communicate on the protocol. So yeah, feel free to message me on there. I might hear it on here and respond right away. Probably I won't hear it right away. I think one day, maybe in the future, I might put Nostr on my phone too. But then at that point, it's like, does it even matter if you communicated with me on my website? I almost like going to my website just to see like new messages that I've got. So in that way, it is a direct message, but it's not an immediate message. I'm not going to respond right away, probably. Unless you happen to catch me, which would be cool. Anyways, that's a really cool feature. And on that note, I also support what's called Nostr URLs. So same thing. You can just go into the run dialog, Control-Shift-R, and you can paste in a Nostr URL, which is like Nostr : and then either npub or nprofile. And if you just type that in, whatever it happens to be, and press OK, it's going to, again, open up the Messenger client and go to whoever that person might be it Jack Dorsey or whoever you happen to want to talk to. You could do it on my site. So that's another cool feature. And that's just how the Nostr clients work, basically. So that's nothing, I didn't create the protocol or nothing, you know. Here was an example. I've already kind of shown a little bit, so I don't know if we need to do the Notepad example, but let's do it. So I have another program here called Notepad++. I just dragged it onto the desktop from outside. This is a 7-zip file. So this kind of also demos the fact that I have built-in 7-zip extraction support from the 7-zip tool, which means I can pretty much extract anything. RAR files, EXEs, zips, of course, 7-zips. So we got the 7-zip file. We can right-click and we can press extract. It's going to extract it and make the folder here. And now you can see here that the executable, we can just double-click that and run that right away. But another thing, and that'll run in boxed wine. If we right-click here, you can see that it's going to default to boxed wine. And it suggests some other things, some other executables like DOS, but we don't want that. What we want here, let's say, is select all the files again, and let's make them into a zip file by pressing Add to Archive. Now, the reason I do that is that for boxed wine, I also support running zip files, which basically will run any dependencies. Like if your exe file needs some DLLs or something, you can zip them up. And then when you right click the zip file, you can open it in boxed wine. And then that way it'll open Notepad++ with all the dependencies, which in this case aren't any really. They're just a bunch of text files and configurations, but it's a little easier to have those. So that'll load in boxed wine. I found that Notepad++ is one of the slower ones to run in boxed wine. And this is another proof of concept, I would say. This isn't something, this is like, I'm not showing you this to show you like it runs full speed. It runs 5% speed maybe, I would say. And it's also not super interoperable. Like, there we go. So Notepad++ is running, but if I wanted to access this file, that's harder. That means I should have put it in the zip as well. So I don't have that interoperability where I can just drag this onto there. But this is the real executable for Notepad++, and it can run. It's not properly sized, but you can see it's all right there. And it can open whatever files it can see, which are pretty much just its own files. You can open up the executable in the executable, which is kind of cool, and see it. So there we go. That's an example. And I can even do that on my own web browser here. I can right click this and open it in Monaco. Oh yeah, it's like, be careful with this. It's my browser's telling me, but there you go. So you can see it's the same file that it opened on both. So that's another cool little meta feature, I would call it, if we're just calling things features. Map the test folder. Yeah, I did that. We already had them mapped. As far as being able to create folders and stuff, yeah, you can just right click on the desktop. I'm going to change the wallpaper to something cool again. This for a bit. Right click the desktop here. We can make a new folder like so. When you have a million shortcuts, I have a known bug where it's sometimes the grid gets a little wonky, so I think we might be in that case right now. Made the new folder. I can call it test folder. Oh, I could call it test folder if boxed wine didn't steal my keyboard. Boxed wine, like I say, is a proof of concept. Most people wouldn't use it. Not as a daily driver type of software. So here's the test folder I made right here. And then within the test folder, you can just make your basic files like a text document or a rich text document. And in this case, what I call a rich text document is basically the tiny WYSIWYG editor. That's also how I make my blog posts. But I have added support for RTF files. So I think I have an RTF file here. Yeah, here's an RTF file I drag on. And it'll actually open in the tiny MCE editor, but it'll convert the RTF file to markup, basically. So if you open it here, there we go. It read an RTF file. It doesn't properly extract the images, unfortunately. And this is just some random sample file. But it's an example that it can also read RTF files. And my blog posts are also WHTML, tiny WYSIWYG, tiny MCE WYSIWYG files, which are basically just really simple files. So if we right click on this, my current blog post, we open the file location. Here's the file here, and we open it in Monaco. You can see it's just very simple markup, like paragraph, link, nothing fancy going on for how my blog posts are, which is how I like it. I've also integrated the markup editor, the WYSIWYG editor with how when you click a picture, instead of opening in another tab, it opens in my photo editor. So you can see here my photo of my kids. This is an older photo though; they're older now. Or when I first started at Microsoft, which I was pretty proud about. I haven't done a blog post in a while. This blog post is like a year old, so I need to do another one. But I'm going to do one soon, so that's something to look forward to. Back to the list here. What do we got left? So many things, I feel like. We did the map directory, the news documents here. Auto-generating thumbnails, we've kind of discussed that. We've discussed how Peak works. Streaming music, this is something I do daily. So if you go to my public folder in music, I've got a few playlist files for Soma FM. These are streaming channels. If you look at the one here, Groove Salad, that's the one I listen. Groove Salad Classic, that's the one I listen to. If we drag it into, let's just open it in Monaco just to see the source of it. You can see here it's just a playlist file that links to some of the Soma FM streaming MP3s. So we can double click it here, and it basically just starts playing the music. Now we're gonna not play the music in case there's some kind of copyright stuff going on. But as you can see here, it opens in what's called WebAmp, which is basically classic Winamp that everybody knows and loves. And this is a very full-featured version of Winamp. Like right-click's the same. You can set all the skins. I've got my favorite skins on here. I've also discussed with the guy who makes this plugin, and he's allowed me access to his like Winamp Skin Museum API. So as you see here, I have another option called random, and you just randomly will get random skins. So you can just have any random WebAmp skin, which is kind of cool. And it'll also remember them. So if I were to close this and then I open it again, it's going to remember the skin. Pretty weird looking skin though. Let's use my favorite one, which is Spy Amp. So we got the Spy Amp skin. Another cool thing it can do is also have a music visualization through the Milk Drop plugin. So you see here, this will open up the Milk Drop plugin, and you can disconnect it from Winamp here or connect it, and you could put like Winamp in the corner here. Let's say, yeah, let's put it on the corner, but let's disconnect Milk Drop, and you can see we can actually make it bigger, and this visualization moves to the music. And another really cool thing you can do with it, not only can you resize it, but let's put it back to the normal size here. We put it over here, and you can right click here and say desktop mode, and then it becomes the wallpaper, which I thought was kind of cool. So this is how I have it most days. I'll have the music visualization running as the wallpaper. I'll have my Messenger app, and I'm just like I use my website like my OS basically. And then if you right click on the desktop and go to background, you can see that it knows that it's in a music visualization, and you could pick this to get off of it. You could uncheck here and it'll go back to being in the window. Cause yeah, like that's sometimes people don't know how to unlaunch that. I mean, I say people as if anyone else has ever used this feature. I have no idea. I built this website for myself. Like that's one thing. It's like a personal website that's like very personal. Not only it's personal in that it's got my stuff on it, but I personally use it for myself, and I like to personalize it. So it's almost as personal as it gets, honestly. So welcome to my site in that way. I've discussed Git support. I haven't discussed Wasm support. This is a cool one. So Wasm, there's a repository called Wapom.io, and I'm linked in with Wapom.io. So if we open up another terminal here, I have Wapom commands. Oh, there we go. Wapom. Wait, command not found. Oh, because I didn't put anything else in. You have to specify something. So let's say we want to run the Wapom. Basically what Wapom is it's like package management for WebAssembly files, and WebAssembly files are like executables that you can run in the browser. So cowsay is a program that you can run in Linux, and it'll show this cow, but you can also say hi, and then the cow will say hi. So that's kind of a neat little example that you can do with it. And going one step further than the Wapom repository, I've also now added support for Wasm files. So if we drag it on here, .wasm file, you can actually run just raw Wasm binary files on my OS now. So we see here you can run cowsay directly, and it works. It takes input. So that's another cool thing. And I think that could be the future of my OS long term, is like a WebAssembly kernel of sorts. And I've seen a few people do that, and that's long term what I'm thinking about. But I'm a GUI man. I'm a graphical user interface guy. So it was important to me to start from the most complicated, you know. If you can build a toaster, you can build the universe kind of thing. So it's like build the most complicated thing, and then it's like, oh, well, then you need this, then you need this, then you need this. And that's essentially how I built my OS. It's like, well, I want a desktop. Okay, well, then I need a box to put stuff in. I want icons. Well, I need a list, you know. One brick at a time, I like to say when people ask me how I made it. Keyboard shortcuts, we've gone through most of them. Shift F12 is to open up the dev tools. Other than that, I think I discussed all the basic ones. I also have file search, so if you were just opening up my blog post folder and you wanted to look for a specific thing, let's say Hong Kong, let's type Hong Kong. I was in oh, so it does classic Hong. We'll get to emulated games pretty soon. I got some ROMs, but I guess I never wrote a blog post about Hong Kong. That was before I wrote blog posts. So let's think of somewhere where I went in my travels. Let's say Romania. Did I type that? Oh yeah, there we go. So I at one point talked about Romania, and then you can open up that blog post directly and try to see where I talked. Oh, there I talked about it. Yeah, I went through Bulgaria, Romania, and I'm in Moldova. That's true. I was there. There's proof right there. Although that's not Moldova right there. This is Moldova right here. Although, yeah, that's a Moldovan goat, just so you know. There's search. Search works pretty good for the most part, I would say, assuming the files are there. But it could be better. I'm always working to improve search because I want people to be able to find my files and stuff. Next up on the list, yeah, so we discussed file search. The clock itself, I'm going to hide me again so I can show the clock again because I'm in the way of the clock. If you right-click the clock here at the bottom right, you see local time and server time. If you were to click server time, probably it's not going to do much because my system clock is pretty synchronized, which is what it was reading from for local time. But for what it will do for server time is it actually can talk to a free public NTP, National Time Protocol, or name, I don't know what it's called. The time protocol, basically, servers that are using atomic clocks. So if you want, you can get an atomically synchronized signal in my website, even if your local clock is like completely off sync. You could just sync with my thing, basically, which I thought was pretty cool. And on that note, actually, of that, let's refresh this here. I want to open up the dev tools, the real dev tools. If you see here, this is actual dev tools from the real browser. And this is kind of showing the real inner workings of the website. And what you do here, what I wanted to show here is if you go to sources and you go to threads, I've actually done multi-threading on my site as well, which is pretty rare for browsers, websites right now. So you see here the clock and the wallpaper are actually running in separate processes. So if we were to freeze this main process here where the icons and stuff are, the wallpaper would keep moving, the clock would keep moving. And one day that's again where I want to keep moving forward with this WebAssembly concept and modularizing things to get it to the point where everything can be a thread almost. And then it essentially becomes even harder to freeze the thing, even further getting into the point where this is like an OS, even though it's not. I know. People like to remind me it's not an OS. That's okay. So that's another cool feature. I think one day it'll be an OS, so we just got to keep fighting with this. Just to finish off right-click menu, now that I'm right-clicking, you can also access a lot of the same functionality system stuff like cut, copy, delete, rename, to rename it, whatever you want to rename it to. Let's do it here. Rename it to hello. And I've also tried to copy even the rename box. I've tried to copy the style. Like you see when you type, it gets bigger. And just in general, I try to make it like, how does Windows 10 do it in every way, and try to copy every single thing exactly, basically. That's it for those things. Create shortcut is the only other thing. There you go. It created a shortcut. That's the basics of the context menu. Git support, we've discussed this. We discussed file search. We just discussed NTP, workers for the clock and the wallpaper. Yeah, downloading. Loading through URLs, that's a nice feature, I guess. If you see in the URL here itself, dustinbrett.com, what you can do is you could do /, and then you can do like app equals, and you can load a specific app, basically. And you can also do this for URL. So here, let's say File Explorer. So now when you go to the page, it'll just load File Explorer right away in the middle. And it'll keep doing that every time, basically. And you can also do that with the URL. So let's say URL, oops. And what example ones do I have? Here, this blog post. So now every time it can open up that blog post. And that's essentially how I do the sharing links. So if you were to click on the blog post and just share it, the URL that gets created is that same URL. So that if you share that with someone, they will go to my site and it will load that right document right away. So it's kind of a form of sharing, but in the end, you're always going back to my main page and just getting the OS experience. And I hope in the future to have even more integrations like that. So just so that sharing and stuff is easier, I want people to be able to share on my site. What else do we have here? I've saved a lot of it. The URL loading, open files via terminal. Yeah. So the only thing really left is to kind of just make sure we've discussed all the apps. Other than that, like that's the main core features. And then a lot of my work has been on building apps, like the Messenger app, like Monaco. Or no, sorry, the Messenger app I built, minus the Nostra protocol, which I didn't build. But things like Monaco, I shouldn't take too much credit for. I glued it in there, you know? That's how I feel about that. Same with a lot of these. The PDF reader, that's another cool one. So if you go to the public folder and documents, I have my resume on here just for the heck of it. It's a PDF document. It just basically demos the fact that I can open PDF files. And I've recently added support for bigger documents. So something like, I had the hero's journey here. Yeah, the hero's journey is like a 300-page PDF. Now when you open it, you'll see the scroll bar here kind of gets smaller and smaller as the page loads. Before it had to load 300 essentially pictures. It's just a scan of the book. And it was very slow. And it's still kind of slow. Like if right now you wanted to go to page 299, you got to wait. But before you had to wait anyways. So it's a little bit more efficient than that, I would say. And let's just kind of look through other examples here of my test files, just so we can kind of go through those. This MP3 was to kind of demo again about dynamic thumbnails. I also read the metadata from within MP3s, these ID3 tags they're called. So you see it's got the album cover in the MP3, which is kind of cool. What other test files do I have here worth discussing? I mentioned the image support for QOI files. This is quite okay image format. Not a popular format, not part of browsers currently, but it's one that I support. Same with JPEG XL. If I can find my JPEG XL example, that's hard to find, actually. It's hard to find because Windows can't support thumbnails. There it is. So this is the .jxl file, and this is another format. This is a contested format because Chrome decided not to support it, but Safari supports it now. But if you go to my website, you get the support for free. It's another cool thing I like to try to add. RAR files, as I mentioned, you can extract RAR files. You can extract almost any kind of file. So I think that pretty much is it for demo files. Here's some other cool apps I have on here. IRC. I found out a while ago that the IRC version 3 protocol allows WebSocket connections, and that LiberaChat servers are now publicly hosting WebSocket. So again, sticking with client side and wanting everything to be just in the browser, I now am able to connect to IRC directly in the browser. And this LiberaChat server is pretty big, like 30,000 people, tons of channels. So you could go on a channel here, like the Linux channel, 2,000 people on here. And you're doing this in my browser, and you can just have this huge discussion. You can see all the users here, and it's just a classic IRC, like back in the day when I used to be on MIRC in Windows. That's why I loved having IRC. But as you see here, there's no chat history. That's a problem. That's a persistence issue with IRC, which is also why I wanted to get Nostr, which I have now, the messenger app. With this, you have that persistence. So if someone sends me a message, even if I'm not there, I'll get it later. Pretty important. So I'm happy that I now have that in there. I've also got this AI chat. I've kind of got a few chat clients, I suppose. This one was just kind of during the AI hype earlier this year, where I was like, oh, cool, I want to build an interface to talk to the web bots, the LLMs of the world. So if you see from the gear here, you can talk with Hugging Face, OpenAI, and one that I was pretty proud of, unfortunately it's not working right now, so I won't demo it, was Web LLM. And that was kind of similar to with the Stable Diffusion, where it's running with Web GPU and it's running AI locally. That was also what you could do with this LLM, this large language model. And it was working for a long time. I've got videos where I demoed it. And it had that same problem where it really kind of drags the machine down when it's doing its thinking. It slows the GPU down too much. But that demo was working. Unfortunately, it doesn't work right now. That was a cool app, though. And actually, I could have demoed talking to Hugging Face. This is talking to one of the free API servers that lets you talk to LLMs. Hello, dude. And it's pretty fast and responsive because it's actually running on someone else's server. But it's free, so I just kind of integrated it in because I thought, hey, why not? I've got so many games on here. I didn't even go through them. But again, going back to this is my personal website, Doom. I grew up with Doom. This is like one of my favorite games. So I had to integrate Doom. And I've actually made a video where I showed like I have seven or eight different ways that you can run Doom because because of all these emulators and stuff I have. You can basically anything runs Doom, and any app I made essentially runs Doom as well. Is the idea behind that. But another, like almost like an Easter egg, if you right click on Doom and open up the file location, I've got a lot of shareware DOS games, my favorites basically, 13 of them. So feel free to check these out. Like Biomenace, we got Blakestone, we got Cyberpuck, we got Duke Nukem 3D, and it can play all these at once actually. Duke Nukem 1, and it can get pretty crazy when you're playing all of them as far as how DOS music goes, but as you can see here, you can just play whichever. Like, let's just keep Blakestone open. Oh, it's PC 13 or was that PG 13? Yeah, maybe that's a little violent, that one. We don't need to play that, but check these out. Those are all my shareware games that I've kind of just got hiding on there for people to check out. Other crazy games I've got that are pretty cool, like Space Cadet. This is a classic if people remember this one. That one's just so much fun. And this was another one that I grew up with as a kid, so to be able to play this is pretty fun. So that's the classic pinball game. Ski Free is like another executable. We've already demoed Box Wine. The X-Ball, this is really cool. The audio is a little rough when you first started. It's like brrr. Oh, no, I never did that. Brrr, brrr. Oh, it's loud anyways, but the X-Ball is another one that I have a lot of fond memories about, and I was really happy to be able to find a port to play that. Let me refresh before I play this next one here. I want to keep the resources tight. Quake 3 Arena. Yeah, Quake 3. My website actually plays a full version of Quake 3. I mean, I say full in that it functions, but it is missing some maps. But as you can see here, this is just like legit Quake 3, like that I remember back in the day as a kid. So you could just play this for hours if you wanted. This is running local on my website. It's another fun one that I thought was pretty cool. Commander Keen is just another shareware one. This Classy Cube is pretty neat. I'm not a Minecraft player myself, but this is like a local version of Minecraft for people that like to play Minecraft. So I thought that was kind of a fun one to be able to add on to there as well. Other than that, Ruffle. Okay, Ruffle's another cool one. So as far as Flash emulation, if you go to public and go to documents, Flash files. I've got some of my favorite Flash files. My site can play any Flash file, but things like the Badger song, Badger, mushroom, mushroom. Nice. It's a fun song from like 25 years ago, probably. And I've got a few other little Flash demos on here. This one's a fun one. It's like a fake version of Windows in my fake version of Windows, but it's the Flash version, so it's much more parody about like it crashing and like constantly having problems. So it's more of a joke one, kind of. But it's another cool thing it can run. Other than that, though, I think we've gone through most of it. Honestly, I can't see any others worth mentioning. Vim is another cool one, I guess. I mean, I don't personally use Vim, but it's a file editor. So let's say one of these files here. Which one's worth editing? Here, the Markdown file. Open with Vim. A lot of people like Vim. It's got a lot of keyboard shortcuts and it's got a huge following. So I was also able to integrate Vim. That's another cool one, and maybe we'll just leave it at that. As like, those are all the features of my website, with probably a lot that I didn't mention. So I hope you really enjoyed this kind of overview showcase of what my website can do, dustinbrett.com, and my side project, DatalOS. It's on GitHub. So thanks for checking out this video. If you like it, please throw me a like. If you want to check out more like this, please subscribe so you can kind of motivate me to really see that there's a following here and be like, yeah, let's keep doing this. Which is kind of what's been happening anyways. Like, I've had such a great following and fan base of people that are supportive and everything, and I just thank everybody for that, and I hope you like what I've been doing here. So thank you, and see you in the next one. Bye.